The advice provided in this podcast is general in nature. For your specific situation, you will need to get in contact with your local OT, vehicle modifier or mobility dealer and set yourself up with an assessment or a trial. Trials really do put you in the driver's seat, so get out there and get one going. Before we get started, we just want to do a quick shout out to our sponsors who make this show possible: Mobility Engineering, Driving Well and Williams OT. This show takes time and money to put together, and we are forever grateful for their passion for our industry.
G'day and welcome to the DriveAble Podcast. I'm Brad Williams from Williams OT in South Australia, and joining me on this episode we've got the whole cast. We've got Ali from Mobility Engineering in Sydney.
Hello.
And Jenny in Queensland from Driving Well. G'day to all of you.
Hello, how are you, Brad? How are you, Ali?
Hi team, how's it going? Very excited for the very last episode.
Yeah, so what we're doing in this episode is that we're winding up the podcast for the time being. Who knows if it'll come back in the future, but we're all extremely busy. So finding the time to bring you these episodes week in, week out has become really difficult to be able to do. So we're doing a final episode, and this final episode is bringing you our highlight episode. So what we're going to do is we're going to have a recap and a look back on what happened in the past, and what we're going to do is bring you our top three. Now, I don't know about you two, but I spent ages trying to figure out what my top three were, and I'm not going to tell you now because we're going to bring that out in the future. But I don't know if you found it difficult or not, but I found it extremely difficult to pick only three episodes. What about you guys?
Yeah, look, to be honest, when I was thinking about it, I ended up with like 15 or 20 people. I just kept, each one was just so inspiring. And mostly the interviews, when we interviewed people and even industry people, learning so much from the industry. So yeah, I just, I focused on the ones which really personally, I guess, affected me the most, and it was interesting because there's a bit of a theme to it, but yeah, other than that I just couldn't really decide. It was just all really inspiring stuff, so it was good.
I found it a bit easier. I had some top picks already going into preparing for our final episode, so I'm looking forward to talking about them.
Yeah. We're going to go to our jingle and our little advert like we do in every episode, and when we come back from that, we're going to start unpacking. So hang around, everyone.
Driving Well Occupational Therapy loves working with people of all ages and with all kinds of medical conditions to safely give them the opportunity to explore their driving goals. Okay, welcome back everybody, and yeah, very excited to get stuck into everyone's highlights and reflections on the podcast. So we'll kick it off with you, Jenny. You sounded pretty confident, unlike indecisive Brad and I. So how about you give us your top three and let us know what you think?
Yeah, I'd love to. My top three come from I guess a little bit of bias in that they were recorded in my season with Brad that we filmed throughout 2024, which is so much fun. I have really loved being part of the podcast. My top three, so two of mine are client stories, and the other one is a more general industry episode. So there's client stories. One of them was episode 91. A client, his name was Travis, and he, for people that had listened to his episode, he and Brad will remember from his interview, he had a car accident that resulted in double lower limb amputation. And the time prior to his accident, one of his main hobbies that he was really getting into was amateur car racing. And so he would have loved chatting to him, Ali. He was all of the stuff about cars that I've got no idea about. My car is a way for me to get from A to B, but for him, it was just such an important part of his life. And throughout the initial part of his journey and his rehab. And he was just so raw and so open and so vulnerable about his whole, even his hospitalization experience and the trauma that he experienced and the work that he's done in not only rehabbing himself physically, but the work that it takes to emotionally and mentally continue to recover and continue to live with such a traumatic injury. It was so generous of him to be so open and vulnerable. And the like the initial part of his recovery and like getting back to driving was one of the top goals, like for him to get out of hospital and to get back to driving were his initial top goals. And he was a dream client in terms of being able to adapt to hand controls and mods very, very quickly. He was an ISQ funded client, so he had his, because it was a road accident here in Queensland, he came under the state-based road trauma compensation. So it was sort of a bit of an easier run in terms of handling that side of things. And he ended up returning to driving with a satellite accelerator, and that with the car that he had was, I think it was I was having a listen to his episode last night just to remember what car. There was a little Renault Clio that had paddle shifters, and he was able to actually use the car in that fashion, so as his road car, but then it was initially, like, it was gradually getting him back to being able to do some racing stuff. Yeah,
That's really cool.
Yeah, no, it was a great episode, and we explored so much in regards to his journey, and I think there's a lot of people that can relate to that journey that he's been through, and even if you're starting that type of journey, he unpacked a lot of what he went through, but just the excitement that came through being able to do his passion and actually drive fast in a controlled way, but drive fast and be able to do that with authority, really, and really have a great time doing it. It was really good fun.
And that was a longer term goal for him, and he ended up converting that vehicle completely into a race, a track vehicle, and getting a second vehicle, which didn't surprise me. He went for a Holden Commodore Ute so that he could load himself up in the back, and he can jump up in the tray and go on dump runs and tip runs, and he can take his modified mountain bike out in the Ute as well. But one of my favorite things that he talked about in terms of just getting back to some normality was to be able to go out for a coffee, and also be able to take his partner out and go through the drive-through at Macca's and get a McFlurry. So, just that simple, the spectrum of goals that returning to driving just enabled him. And someone like that there's just no stopping him, no holding him back. I think
it's not the only time a McDonald's drive-through came up, and how rehabilitating that is to be able to go through a drive-through and get something for yourself and not rely on somebody else. It came up. I think it was with John as well. So that was a great. It's great to hear those type of things. So if people want to go back and listen to that one, Jenny, what was the episode number?
91.
91. All right. So that's your first top episode. What have you got as number 2?
Number 2 is another client story. It was episode 87, and the guests were Gordon, who was a user, a client, and his wife Robin. They did the episode together, and they talked about more of a higher level van modification that needed a lot of future proofing in that vehicle selection and the vehicle scripting from the outset. So he was a client that he talked about his diagnosis was a slow progressive neurological condition, and these couple are in their 60s now. They're retired, with grown up kids that live across the country, and one of their main hobbies was caravanning in their retirement. But since he acquired his diagnosis, he became heavily involved within the support group for that condition, and he's on the on the committee and part of their association. And they just really understood that they needed a solution that would work for them now when they first went through the driving and vehicle modification process, because he was still driving. And the main issue that they'd had was that they had their Jeep and they were finding it very, very difficult to lift his little compact folding electric wheelchair in and out of the boot. He wasn't able to do that anymore, and she was no longer able to do that anymore. So they realised that they needed a solution that was going to meet their goals now when they first started going through that process, knowing the process would take a long time, but then also that solution would be sustainable for them over the coming years. And I think it was just a really, really great. So what episode did I say? Episode 87. Really great illustration of and Brad and I and you would have come across this too, Ali, but we and so this is an NDIS participant. So we've got a framework and governance and regulations for what we as OTs need to understand and need to work within in terms of applying for funding from the government, and that the client really needs to understand, well, this is the frame. Like if you're wanting to seek assistance, this is the framework that we have to work with, and we've got to be able to meet all of these criteria and tick all of these boxes. So it was just really nice that they really understood that they needed to listen, they needed to seek out the advice and listen to the advice around what the requirements were. And they really understood it wasn't to get a solution that met their needs then, but for the next 5 to 10 years for the lifetime of the vehicle, and that they needed to have a solution that would accommodate possibly a bigger wheelchair, because if he was no longer able to, like if he had deterioration in function, that maybe he wasn't able to transfer anymore or drive anymore, that he would need to have a solution that fit a larger wheelchair that maybe he could drive from, or maybe he would need to travel in as a passenger. And so they ended up going with a Volkswagen multivan that had the lowered floor all the way through to the front, and they had the automated tailgate and the ramp fold down, so that would accommodate a larger wheelchair, which by the time the vehicle delivery and modifications had kind of happened with that time frame, he was looking at the bigger wheelchairs. And he's still driving, and he'd also had some other health issues, some non-related health issues that's put him in hospital and set his function back a little bit, and he needed to do some recovery. So you don't know what else is going to happen in terms of So it was just a really great episode to really highlight and understand that considering those future needs.
Yeah, it really was. What I really enjoyed was the two of them talking and giving both of their perspectives from a husband and wife team, about him and his driving, but also her considerations about being also a driver, and how that actually works together, and how she's supporting him to be able to get out into the community, and how that all mixes together to be able to make decisions for it. The other thing that you highlighted, and Ali, you know this as well, that process about how long it takes and how much goes into it. I mean, we've had issues with that this week where people are accusing us of rorting the system, but it's the process. It's what we have to do. It's what we have to go through if we're going to ask the government for a large pool of money. There's lots of boxes that have to be ticked. There's lots of process to go through. And then there's also the wait with getting the car modified, getting it into those workshops as well. And all of that got unpacked in that episode, and quite a few episodes as well, like Trent Rothel was another one, and I can't remember his name in WA. It was one of our very early on. Jamin. Yeah. That's another one where we unpack that big high level conversion with the floor.
And it's always consistent. You're not getting anything faster than 2 years by the sound of it. We haven't had a story that's much faster than that. So it seems to be around that kind of 1.5 to 2 year mark is what you're kind of taking by the time you're walking away with your car.
Yeah, I think that's a really solid ballpark. I think with Gordon and Robin, it was about from day one of assessment through to delivery of a vehicle was about 2 years. And
Yeah,
we 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 looked at a lot of options for Gordon and Robin because we were trying to, you know, there's always sort of a hierarchy and scaffolding of what we're going for first. Like if we can fit without needing to go a lowered floor conversion, which adds significant costs and significant timeframes, then we as OTs we'll usually want to go down that track first. So we're
yeah,
trying to work out was that going to work, was that going to fit, but it just wasn't going to fit for these guys. And um I think it was the most number of trials that I had ever done to try and figure out what was going to be the best solution. I think we hit 6 vehicle trials, and
Yeah,
different configurations and setups to finally land on. Well,
and that's not uncommon.
we
That's
need
not
life
uncommon.
wheelchair, functionality in the long run. So that's what we had to do.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna add in one of my bonus episodes. It's not one of my top three. It's one of the ones that was a close runner-up. Trent Rossell as well. That one, then that's episode 63. So yours is 87, mine's 63. We spoke about from South Australia having to travel to New South Wales to
Mm,
actually do fittings and things like that as part of that episode.
mm.
Massive big process about getting the trial vans here to South Australia to trial stuff, but then also making sure that that fits because we don't actually have a provider here in South Australia that can lower floors, and that was a massive big aspect of trying to make this work. So yeah, look,
It's the
there's
same in
lots of
Queensland.
episodes where we've unpacked that, but yeah, that episode 87 with Gordon is a really good episode to unpack that. And if you want a bonus one, Jalen, I can't remember what episode that was because I haven't listed that one down, but Trent also episode 63 as well. So yeah, all right. Number
Number
three,
three.
number
Number
three.
three.
What do we got?
Number three was like I said at the start, was an industry episode, and I just loved this episode so much. This
So much
was
fun. So
this
much fun. I know which one you're going for.
Brad knows what it is.
So much fun.
This is the episode that Brad and I recorded whilst we were at the OT Exchange conference in Perth in June in 2024. So it was on around lunchtime on day 2 of the conference, and we set up shop basically right in the middle of the exhibition hall, and we had all the buzz and the energy of the OT Australia stand right behind us, as well as all of the different exhibitors and OTs sort of milling around and networking and learning and just enjoying being OTs, and being in a place where everyone gets it. Everyone gets all of the hard work that we all do to try and make a difference for our clients, and likewise all the exhibitors and suppliers that support us. We're all sort of contributing to that atmosphere as well. So it was just such a lovely atmosphere, and we didn't really have a plan going in. We just sort of, much like this episode, Ali said at the start of in our briefing to each other this morning, let's just see what happens. So basically we did that with this episode, and
We're
we
grabbing people.
we literally were like
Come on,
looking
goodness.
around the room, and who is there? It was on the so that I think contributing to the atmosphere that morning, I had just delivered my oration address because I was the winner of the OT Australia oration award for all the work that I'd done with the learner drivers and potential to drive approach. And well, I was on a high from that. I think no, I think
You are owning the room, Jenny. You
oh,
are owning the room. Everybody wanted to chat to Jenny because of how
so
successful that oration speech was. Hey, you haven't highlighted your oration speech as one of your favorite episodes, but please, everybody go and listen to it. If you're an OT, especially, if you're an OT and you haven't listened to it yet, we're lucky enough to be able to share that with permission from OT Australia. You've got to go and listen to it. If you want to be inspired to be an OT, Jenny, you're a superstar. That was so good. And I just want to put special mention out to that one. But you were owning the room because of that success and how much people were wanting just to talk to you and talk about how wonderful your talk was. So yeah, congratulations to you once again.
I think because of that sort of put me in a lovely position to be able to, when we were recording our episode, that I was able to bring everyone in. So we were lucky enough to be able to grab two of the conveners of the conference. So Kathleen Langford and Lisa Cooper from Inside Out OT from over in Perth. They run a small private practice together over there, and they just spoke so beautifully about just their experiences of just private practice working as an OTs in Perth and what it takes to convene a conference. Like there's a lot of work that goes into the scenes behind the scenes there. And then we had another friend and fan and fave guest of DriveAble, Chris Pearce, driving
He
OT.
got 2 runs, the lucky fella. He got 2 runs on the podcast.
Yeah. From OT Services Group in Perth, together with Laura Simmons from TheraTrack. We're able to grab them together and have a 4-way conversation from 4 people from 4 different states, all in the one room together, which is really, really cool.
That's cool.
And then we also had Karen Teig, who was the MC of the conference.
Yeah.
I didn't know who Karen was, but she was very generous and lovely. And I know, Brad, you were a big fan.
I was awestruck. I was starstruck. I've listened to Karen Kai on the radio. I'm an absolute sports nut. I always listen to ABC Grandstand, and that was meeting a childhood hero just to know.
Brush with fame.
Yeah, brush with fame. It was great. But she was also really vulnerable and spoke about her health and how driving really was something that she took for granted, I guess, for a little bit, and then opened up about her journey to recovery as well. And that was something that wasn't expected, just came out of the blue, and she was so generous with her being so open.
And she was quite generous in just giving some suggestions as well, and around how our industry and just OT in more general can potentially present ourselves really positively, and demonstrating the value that we have. We've struggled so much in the last year, in particular in the media, presenting providers in a bad light. But she was really encouraging that, well, you guys really do make a difference, and let's try and focus on that side of things about what we're able to do. So it was really lovely talking to Karen. And our final guest on that episode was one of my favourite people within the OT world, was Sam Hunter, the CEO of OT Australia. And she, again, was just so generous in giving us, we asked for, just can you come on for 5 minutes? And it turns into this lovely 15-minute chat. And she is very politically savvy, and she again talked about sort of the what we can do as OTs and providers in this industry to really positively present ourselves, and it was just really encouraging of that, and encouraging the strength in numbers as well.
What a year that was, Jenny. It was thank you very much for stepping in over the last 12 months. Well, we've been, gallivanting around the countryside to Perth and doing OT exchanges, but also the time and effort that you put into the podcast over the last year. I know it takes a lot of time and energy, and I just really want to thank you for joining me while Ali took a back seat for the year. It was great to have you on, and having your OT brain as well. But also, the introductions to Miri Monahan as well, and talking about autism and driving. There were so many great episodes, and I'm sure narrowing it down to 3 was really tricky, with only 1 year of being on the podcast. I've been doing it for 3. That's why it
Yeah,
was so
yeah.
hard. We've been doing it
I was
non-stop.
not surprised that you struggled,
Yeah,
that you both struggled.
yeah.
I've done it for 3 years. I really should be able to have 9 top episodes. I think that's only fair. But I have narrowed it down to three. But Ali, do you want to go first with your
Yeah,
three?
yeah. I'll just go off the back of what you were saying. Just a big shout out to Jenny. I think to be honest, you coming onto the podcast in the last 12 months is what completed the podcast in a positive way. So I think that in reflection of and speaking it out with Brad, I think that not only has this podcast like we've got our own things that we're doing and so on, and we're busy. But I feel like it's done a journey and a job, and it's kind of finished. And so I'm really proud that we're all part of that. But also, I think with you coming along, Jenny, you've kind of added a bit of missing, I guess, insight and sort of angles to some of the conversation, and that's really completed. And I think we've really covered almost everything you can cover within. If you were wanting to get your vehicle funded or a vehicle mod, you could just go through all of those episodes and you'd be an expert. So we've covered basically everything. The journey is, I think, done. If it was to do something else, it would definitely be some other form of podcast, which we've discussed, and whatever that might be, like in Ali's words, let's see what happens. So yeah. But yeah, so in that respect, I just wanted to just say thank you to all. And I will talk about the episodes, and I will just talk about some other learnings as well. So when I thought about the episodes, I was more trying to, to be honest, I'm a fairly enthusiastic person anyway, and I kind of love them all. So everything is always exciting for me. And so I was just like, oh, that one was really good, and that one was really good, and that was really good. And then I thought, I'll just stick to the personal stories. And lo and behold, McDonald's drive-through was also part of my one as well, which was John Davey. And John, again, his story was the same story, was the unexpected adversity what really kind of struck me, and how they overcame it. So John, he was older, and then he just went to sleep with a bit of a flu, and then woke up and had a meningococcal outbreak, and had to have amputations and so on. And all he wanted to do eventually at the end of it was just go for a Macca's drive-through. And he was so happy that he actually didn't go anywhere. That was a really cool episode, because he couldn't actually transfer properly in and out of the car. So he needed help to get into the car. And then he'd just go for a drive. And then he'd go to drive-through, and then whatever. And we were kind of like, what's the point? You can't get in and out. And he said, the point is I get to go to Macca's drive-through, and I can go buy that stuff, and I can come home, and that's all that matters. I'm just going for the drive, and the car was the destination. And I've spoken about that recently as well. That was very common, I think, for all of us in our childhood. The car was the destination. It wasn't like you went somewhere. You just got into the car and hung out with your friends. So that was really cool, I guess, just having that from John, and how he just overcame that and positively just moved through his life.
I really love that, just that concept, Ali, the car is the destination, because we, as part of our practice, when we're doing any vehicle mods applications, we talk with the client, okay, well, where are you going? And let's list out all the destinations, and we do the value for money exercise by sort of comparing, well, the cost to go here by taxi is this, the cost to go here, the cost to go here. And we are trying to demonstrate the value for money via the alternative costs with the destinations. But we're really not highlighting the car being the destination for, I mean, it depends on, your interests. And, for me, like, but, the car can be the destination. I think that's really important to not forget that.
Yeah, definitely. I think the social side of things, society has shifted a bit. And like my daughter, she's got she's about to get her provisional license. And we were talking about, do you want a car and blah, blah, blah. And she was like, oh, don't think I'd really go out. I don't go to that many parties, and I don't think I'd really go out that much on the weekends. And I was like, when I was 16, you just got a car and you just went and the car was the destination. Like you
Drive
got into
around
the
in the
car and
car.
just drove around, like it wasn't like you had to go somewhere, but it seemed like um the culture now is like, what's the point if I'm not going to go somewhere type thing, which is, it's nothing wrong with it. It's just different. So, but in that point, when you say the car is the destination, I mean, she wasn't one of my top three, but I always remember that episode, and I follow her online, is Leanie, and that was the Wonder Woman lady with the obsession with her Land Rover Discovery, because I also love her Land Rover Discoveries. So yeah, and for her, the car was the destination, and you always see her hanging out with her car like her best friend. And I understand that, because I think that's why I'm in that field. Like I literally take photos of my car and I look at them, and like it's a kid. Like it's really weird. And people will look at my phone and they're like, "Why is there photos of your car?" And I'm like, I just love it. Like I just look at it and I just like look at it with love. And then someone at work was like, it's really weird that you look at an object that's material, like a piece of metal, and you like actually express love. And I'm like, yeah, I do. I just love it so much. And for me, it's the memories of, like I've got a Subaru Outback. I've taken it out to the bush. I've slept in the boot and all that stuff. And that's what it's all about, the freedom. So, and that's really, I guess I will segue that onto the next one, which was Rob Lucan, which was a very similar kind of, I guess, aspect to a shocking way of how he became disabled. He was fishing, and then he passed out, and then he woke up with viral encephalitis and various disabilities and so on. And he is probably one of the coolest guys on the planet, because he created this buggy thing that sails with a big sail thing. Don't even know what it's called. Some custom buggy sail thing.
Yeah,
and he just flies up and down beaches. Yeah, like a parasail with a buggy.
A three-wheel buggy, and Gigi can get up to some top speed on that thing.
Yeah, and it was just cool, his stories about how he just takes this thing out onto random beaches in the middle of nowhere, gets himself completely stuck, rolled over, buried in the sand. Things don't work, and he gets himself out and he keeps on going. It's pretty cool. And he just spends his life doing this kind of extreme sport, and I thought that was really, really inspiring. And yeah, he had a really cool van. Everything was all fitted out in the van, and his van was his life. He was traveling all around the country just doing that. And so that was really, really cool as well. And another one with, yep.
Oh, hang on, just if you want to, please go on YouTube, Rob Lucan, and watch him do this buggy sailing.
I think he calls it kite buggying.
Yeah, something like that.
It's custom. It's a custom thing.
It's like kite surfing, but he's got this three-wheel. He can't do the surfing bit, so he does it along the beaches in this three-wheeled buggy that's been made for him. Just even how to get that buggy onto the back of his car and the winch system and all kinds of stuff like that. But yeah, he utilizes that van of his to go camping, to go out onto these beaches, stay overnight with really significant disability if you look at it on face value. But it does not hold him back at all. And he's living life to the full. Because he's almost lost his life once. He knows that he's pretty indestructible, I think. So,
so it's interesting.
Great adventures.
That one thing that reminds me of is one of the learnings, or a few of the learnings that I got indirectly out of this podcast, was I started to learn like trends within the industry and trends within like society and even ages. And what's really interesting is I call it like old school versus new school disability industry, if you'd like, or disabled cohort. Definitely, and it's nothing. I don't say it's like a societal like it's a negative or a positive thing. I think it's just the way that society has evolved. But when you go back to the kind of the Rob Lucans and the John Davies, basically they were kind of like, we just had to make it work. And so we just found a solution, even if it was crap or not, or expensive or whatever. We weren't really classified as disabled. We weren't this, we didn't have funding. We just had to figure something out, and we just got on with life. Whereas in the modern sort of culture, particularly with NDIS, you have you seem to have like oh, well, we can't do something unless we have this. We can't do something unless we have that. And it's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's just a completely different approach to how they're doing things. The advantage with the one of the disadvantages with the old way is that, well, if you're going around to a disabled person and saying, "Hey, mate, figure it out," probably 1 in 1 million would figure it out, and the other 999,000 would be, stuck in the corner of a room, causing a major strain on a family and society. So there is that huge benefit, but it was interesting seeing those kind of old school attitudes and those stories and seeing what they produced. And yeah,
Making
so
their own hand controls, making their own hand controls.
making your own
In the
stuff
70s and 80s, and out of tractor
which
parts
we
and
which
this
we
stuff.
don't condone. Just disclaimer.
but that's
70s
actually
and
an interesting point though. So that was what we realized when we the surfer lady that we were interviewing, because she couldn't get anything funded. Then basically that was the interview. She wasn't able to get anything funded because she couldn't get anything scoped out, because what she needed was something very custom made, and NDIS and industry is sort of not like that anymore. They don't have the homemade hand controls. They don't have the homemade stuff. It's all just off the shelf stuff. So that was kind of an interesting part of the modern world, is that this custom stuff, it's almost, harder to get, whereas that was all that was around in the past, so interesting kind of shift, how the trends have gone on. So yeah, I thought that was pretty cool. And the other thing that I guess I'll keep going with the episodes. The last one was again another similar one, and I think maybe also I know this person personally as well, which was Mitch Stone, and he basically is he's a footy player, a wheelchair footy player. But again, he was out on a night out on the town, and he was on a boat afterwards, and the boat crashed, and basically he just woke up in a puddle of water in the boat, and almost drowned and so on, and was paralyzed, and and just basically building his story back together, building his life back up. And he's a young guy, and he's got his car all fitted out, and seeing where his life is now on a personal level, it's just really awesome, because he has come through like a fairly athletic kind of childhood. Then he's had this major blow, and he's overcome it. He's gone back into, like the athletic world, and he's got married, and his wife is like an able-bodied partner. He's got a child now, and they've actually built a house as well. Like he bought a block of land and built a house, so they've got this. So it's like a beautiful picture that that Mitch has created. Of a family where a lot of, I guess I like to promote that, because I do get a lot of people in this industry where they think if you become disabled, you may not be able to have a family, or you can't have kind of your standard life like everybody else. And, and it's hard work, but it's possible, and it's beautiful, and people can manage to pull it off. And Mitch has done it really, really well, and he works hard, and he works in the industry. And so that, it's a great episode for me as well.
Yeah, really, really. I don't know how he was actually found in his boat, and I just remember him unpacking that story, and he's just so lucky to actually be found laying down in his boat.
Alive.
Yeah, alive. Yeah, that's quite astounding. Where starting from that, where he's almost dead, through to where he is now playing the wheelchair rugby and stuff like that. So there's so many emotional stories through this podcast as well. It's not all function based and how to get car mods and so forth either. So we've learned a lot of personal stories along this podcast journey as well, and that's the bit that is going to be hard to say goodbye to. The process stuff we've unpacked along the way, and there's, I think we've done that now, and that's all in there in all of these podcasts. But it's that emotional journey that goes with it. And I love our final question. Our final question of driving is more than getting from A to B, and it comes out over and over and over again with the John Davies story about going through the drive-through. Yeah, like you said, Ellie, he can't actually personally put the wheelchair in his car, so therefore it was a big thing for him in regards to getting the mods approved for the hand controls, when he technically can't get out of the car at the other end without help. But like you said, it's the actual art of driving. It always ends up at home again, and he's got the help there when he gets
and he bought the convertible as well. If you remember,
the
he had the
convertible,
little
yeah.
Mercedes two-door convertible. So the car was the destination. He was just taking it for a drive and enjoying the top down and so on. So that was really cool. And yeah, I will add, like, even on a personal level and a professional level, like for me, I think as an OT, you might see a bit more of the client stories, a bit more. Like I just sign off on vehicle mods and paperwork, so I very rarely speak to the clients. So on a personal level, just hearing the stories has been, to be honest, it's been life changing for me. I've developed so much more appreciation for life, and just I talk about so many of these podcast guests and their stories just at my barbecues and, like, friends with friends and pubs and things like that. This person said this, and imagine, when I was speaking to this person, they said this, and imagine what it'd be like that. So yeah, and that's been really good. And one thing I did want to do a huge shout out to, and also just then pass it over to you, Brad, is to Brad. Brad, I guess you are really the architect of this whole thing. So you've really driven the whole thing from the beginning, and had a lot of passion to drive it at the very beginning. And for the first 6 months before we even recorded an episode, you probably don't remember, but you were pestering a lot, and I was getting annoyed, but like I was just doing it anyway because I was like, I know this is going to be a good thing, but God, this guy's so annoying and he's hassling me a lot and he's saying we should do it, and I don't have time, but let's do it. And we got it off the ground, and it's amazing, and so thank you really a lot for that, and really pushing it, and getting me to listen to those power to podcast, learning how to podcast. We taught ourselves how to build a podcast, so that was the first 6 months of just G'ing each other how to, like, learn how to podcast. So yeah, and that was all from Brad. So thanks, Brad. And I guess on that note, I wanted to hand it over to you to give us your 3 or 9 or whatever you want to give us.
Yeah. It's really impossible. My staff know that I'm like a dog with a bone. It's So sorry, Ali.
No, I love it.
With me. It's been quite a journey, and it is extremely hard to finish it off because of the emotional aspects that go through with it. I had Leonie Teagan as one of my episodes with her disco, but you've already mentioned it, so I'm going to go completely off, but just finish off on that one. I'm going to finish off on it because there's a few things in that one, so I get a bonus one here because I was going to talk about her, but I'm going to add in another one instead. But the episode with Leonie about that passion for her car and her old Land Rover Discovery, which she calls a disco, her disco, and how passionate she is about maintaining that car and keeping that car up to mechanical standards, and having to prove to the NDIS that she was going to do that, and that she's going to take the burden of cost if the car breaks down, and getting that over the line. There was so much in that episode that we can all learn from in regards to value for money, and that emotional value for money in regards to, no, this car is the car that we're doing it to, whether it meets the NDIS standards or not. And I actually honestly believe that this had a massive impact on the NDIS changing their guidelines. I actually feel like her story may have been an influencing factor, along with all the other stories as well, with people who can't afford the new cars that in the early stages, everyone had to basically have a new car. Well, I think her story actually had a lot of weight and a lot of power in regards to changing that. Not from people listening to our episode, I hope they did, but the journey that she went through with the NDIS, I feel like within the NDIS it helped change those policies. So that's just a shout out. That's not one of my top 3. All right. So I'm actually going to take it back to episode 1/2, where we had Quan talking about his bionic leg and driving with his Autobot Genium leg and taking his Audi A3 down the drag strip and driving it as fast as he possibly can, being honest about having his walking stick on the clutch and dropping the clutch with his walking stick to actually get a fast start, to get off the line really quickly. But just his enthusiasm, the showing of his legs, and that, Ali, I reckon that's what got us hooked. Like we were going, is this going to work? Is this going to be something that we can do? And just his passion, talking about his story, episode 1, we were hooked from that point onwards, I reckon. So
he's just an infectious, positive guy. He was a great guy.
Isn't he just? It's amazing. The other 2 episodes that I've got are more learning ones. So episode 64, where we had Angela Byrne, it took me almost the entire 2.5 years until she actually did come on to actually get her on to talk about her research study, which has had a massive impact on us as OTs, applying for funding, NDIS, approving funding. But Ali, I know that you've been talking to other people about it overseas as well. But it's the social return on investment for approving car modifications. And it's a research study done by a bunch of people, but the 2 main authors are Claire Hutchison, so shout out to her as well from Linda's Uni, but Angela Byrne, who's now running the OT school down in Hobart, mind you. So big and better things have come her way. Started up the OT school down in Hobart. Amazing things that she's doing down there to get more OTs into the world. But the social return on investment. So not just how much does it cost, but how much value is in these car modifications in regards to social proof. Like getting out, going to the shop to buy milk and bread, and the impact on family members, and unpacking that and putting a dollar value to it, but also how long does it take to pay it off is unbelievable that they're able to get to figures based on how much it is, how long is it going to take to pay off. And it's astounding that I can't remember the actual figures, but over $100,000 worth of modification is paid back in 2 to 3 years in social return on investment. It's just astounding, those figures.
That's amazing.
And it's really worth going back and listening to that episode if you're a driver trained OT or you're a NDIS delegate. Go back and listen to episode 64. Jenny?
We can probably add those in the show notes. We can probably add that PowerPoint, because we've mentioned it a lot in a lot of the episodes. We refer back to it all the time. So I think if you're a driver trained OT or a general OT that's looking at access mods for your clients and applying for funding with any of the insurance schemes, doesn't matter which insurance scheme your client is in, the stats that Ange and Claire have been able to pull together from their studies and their modelling, they've got 5 different scenarios that range from I'm just trying to find it. Here we go.
I'm having a slight technical difficulty. I'm going to be back in 60 seconds. I've got to replug my computer in. You can keep talking. Sorry, guys.
The joys of live recording,
yeah.
and which is what we've done in every
and no edits.
episode. No edits. It's always just go with the flow, and it's not too rehearsed. So put up with, if you're watching this on YouTube, you can see Ali going backwards and forwards in the background trying to find his power cord, I think.
Mobility Engineering is Australia's leading automotive product supplier for disability customers. We have installers all across the country, over 100 of them, and we have the largest range of mobility products for vehicles in the country. Get in touch with Mobility Engineering for any of your driving solutions.
He's disappeared now, but anyway, we'll roll with it. Jenny, it gave you time to look up some of those facts and figures for that episode.
So there's 5 scenarios that they've outlined, ranging from a funder's investment of just over $3,500 right through to $145,000. So it's that breadth and range of basic, like maybe a left foot accelerator through to lower floor, ballpark
Yeah.
and for each of those, as Brad said, they've got the social return on investment for every $1 spent, and the payback period to the funder as well. And I know Brad and I both use that, and our teams, we use that in every single vehicle modification. So we pick the scenarios that your quote is kind of between and outlining. Well, it's somewhere between these figures, and it just is, and we hear the social and the emotional impact, and but this is just a way of quantifying it when you're in a dollar-based system, that being able to quantify really helps get that application over the line.
So that one there, we were using it well before we did the episode. And I'm assuming you were as well, Jenny, for the people that keep on top of their research, but I'm sure it's helping a lot of people out now post that episode. So we learned a lot in that one, in regards to how it influences us to be better therapists. Another episode that really influenced me was right back, and I was sitting back and I was trying to think of her name's Dee, but I couldn't find the episode really quickly here while we've been talking. But something that we introduced into our practice after listening to that close 3 years ago now was the power of an impact statement from the client, from the person, from the participant. The impact statement and how much weight that carries with the OT assessment. And it's something that we introduced after doing that episode. And it's something that I learned from doing this, even though I've been in the industry for too long. When I used to have hair is when I started. So it's been a while. But that impact statement from the client, unpacking that emotional bit. So it's not just the OT making stuff up or misinterpreting information or anything else like that. It's the client story, the participant's emotional attachment with that modification that's going to impact and change their life. And it carries so much weight, and it's something that we do religiously now with every application that goes in, because the OT assessment works alongside that now. So it's something that that's made a massive difference to the way that we practice. So they're the things that I really love about doing the episode, is not just sharing other people's stories, but learning from them as well. In fact, he's got power. He's got that. I was just talking about Dee and her impact statement, and working with her daughter to get in and out of cars as well. That was another episode. But that was a bonus little one. It's actually not one of my top 3, but it's just another little episode there as well. Look, I was going to talk about, I've been chopping and changing all over the place. I was going to talk about my third one as episode 41, where Ali, you interviewed me, and episode 40 before that, where I interviewed you, was a real fun one to do, where you learnt about what I did, and I actually, targeted questions towards you and found out the inner workings of what you do as an engineer and a modifier. That was a really good, fun one to do, but I'm just tucking that in there as a bonus now. I'm actually going to do a cap of a few people in one, okay? Nick Tiago, very, very emotional and shared a lot of personal stuff. Matt Caruana, is that his name?
Yeah.
In regards to his attempted suicide, mentioned an absolute lot about what he's been through as well. Bruno, special shout out to Bruno Palomara, who in season 2 did our intros for the podcast. That was awesome. And he spoke about his journey, about getting his license with anxiety and autism, and so vulnerable to come onto the episode and be able to talk through his journey was absolutely amazing. I've already mentioned Trent Rossell as well, and Jalen with the high-level van access. Jalen with his new business venture with going out and doing videography with his drones and businesses, and his Air B2B stuff from being able to do that. And look, you guys weren't involved in it, but just last week I interviewed Jed Olswager, who's the new talent identification scout for SASI here in South Australia after winning his gold medal. We've had Paralympians on from all kinds of backgrounds, basketball, running, wheelchair athletics as well. Jed's a roller. Just talking to these people about their journey from injury through to getting the best out of their life, and how thriving really relates to that and gives them the keys to be able to get out into the community. I couldn't do just one. There's just so many. I couldn't do it. So I did a capture of everyone in that. There's so many more, and a massive thank you to everybody that donated their time to come onto this podcast. It's been amazing.
Actually, a little tiny little shout out to Jerome as well, because he did all those cool driving controls, custom driving controls he made on his own,
Yeah.
Jerome Wong.
Yeah. And the companies that have donated their time. The companies that have donated their time. So Blue Badge Insurance, talking about insuring cars with modifications and how that works with the NDIS. Paul, his own personal story, but Total Ability and their high-level van. Jerome, PME as well, and talking from PME as a bit of a competitor to yourself there, Ali, but having the confidence to come on and talk openly and willing to share information from there as well. We've had so many companies on. We have the wheelchair providers, Sunrise,
Brawnability.
Who's the other? They make for the Twilight chairs, Permobil.
Yeah,
as well, coming on and talking about wheelchairs, getting in and out of cars, and how to select the right wheelchair to be able to drive from wheelchairs. All of that technical advice as well. And of course the team from
the
modifiers. Freedom.
Sydney, alternate mobility in Brisbane.
Freedom.
Yep.
Mobility Plus.
Mobility
We've had lots.
And also a massive shout out to our teams that give up our time, like Ali, your mobility engineering team, with your teams there as well. We had Omid and Amin on as well, talking about Australian standards. We had Katrina on talking about wheelchair considerations for getting in and out of the car, and how to load wheelchairs and things like that as well. So it has been 105 episodes of learning, emotional journeys, but also time, energy, and commitment as well. So it's been huge, absolutely huge.
I think it's time for your little gift for
Here we
us.
go, everyone. We're celebrating.
On that note,
this is our budget, everyone. This is the budget that we've done the podcast on. I have one party popper. Here we go. Yay to and congratulations to all of us, and a massive thank you and shout out to both of you for joining me for over 3 years and making this thing what it was. Great.
Yeah, thanks very much. Thank you, Brad. Thank you, Jenny.
Thank you, everyone.
Williams Occupational Therapy focus their attention on helping people with their mobility needs. From driving to wheelchairs, Williams OT provides help to get people mobile. As we wind up this episode, please remember that the advice provided in this podcast is general in nature. For your specific situation, you will need to get in contact with your local OT, vehicle modifier or mobility dealer and set yourself up with an assessment or trial. Trials really do put you in that driver's seat.
If you like what you've heard, make sure you like, rate, and subscribe. It really does make a massive difference. If you or anyone you know would like to share a story about driving with a disability, or you would like to get in contact, find the show notes, or find the resources mentioned in this episode, you can find us on Facebook. Just search at DriveAble Podcast for more information.